10x your service design offering with Smaply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smaply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smaply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Welcome to This Is HCD. I'm Gerry Scullion, founder of the Human-Centered Design Network, and as always, I'm your host for today's conversation. This Is HCD is dedicated to exploring the world of human-centered design, service design, and innovation, helping you bring better design practices into your organization. Now, before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your network. And if you want to take the first step in bringing human-centered service design and that approach to your organization, just sign up for my free 5-day email course. The link is in the description. Now, in today's episode, I'm speaking with Lee Moreau, founder of Others Tomorrow, design studio focused on service design and experience design. And Lee has extensive background in architecture and human-centered design, having worked with leading organizations like IDEO, Continuum, and 2x4. Now, we cover a lot in this conversation, including number one, the shifting role in design in turbulent times. Now, we explore how design is evolving amidst all the layoffs and the industry shifts that we're seeing around the world, and what designers need to do to stay relevant. Number two, the power of community and oral history in design. Lee really shares why podcasting and storytelling play a crucial role in shaping the future of human-centered design. And number three, why designers need to embrace adaptability. Whoops, that's a tough one. With changes in industry and politics, we discuss the importance of designers leaning into change rather than resisting it. This conversation touches on political shifts affecting designers, the role of education, and the need for resilience in profession. It's a really honest, it's an unfiltered look at where we are at currently in the state of the world today, and I really appreciated Lee's time and his honesty in getting into it. Let's get straight into this conversation. Lee, I'm delighted to have you on the show. We've just been catching up about all of the mutual connections that we have, mutual friends, and they get really kind of upset when I don't credit them. But Rachel Deakus, I'm obviously joking there, folks. Rachel Deakus is a big friend of this podcast and has been on it a couple of times, and has put me in touch with Lee. And I'm not going to do an introduction for you, Lee, because you're a heavyweight in the world of design, but maybe we'll start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do.
Hi, Gerry. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Rachel, for connecting us. And I am. Where am I? What do I do? I'm sitting here from Boston, Massachusetts. It's early morning because Gerry's over there on the other side of the pond in the afternoon. I'm a designer who kind of stumbled into the world of design consulting and human-centered design from an architecture background. So I'm a licensed architect. I thought I'd be doing architecture forever, and that was my place. And then I just got really lucky and found that you can think about the world in a much more thoughtful, prioritized, and deliberate way than the architecture mode of practice that I was engaging in at the time. So I found this world of human-centered design. And now, after 20 years of practicing at firms like IDEO and Continuum and 2x4, all amazing experiences and great studios. I started my own studio in 2019, and
perfect timing just before a pandemic. But anyway,
it was. I have to say, I think it was perfect timing for me, because I think had I stayed in the job that I was in, at the level that I was at, I would have probably been spending a lot of time trying to make very, very hard personnel decisions and things that would have been about keeping things afloat and protecting people you love. And instead, I was able to spend that time. And while that's all important, I was able to spend that time building a new mode of practice and a new organization, slowly. Right.
So you're talking about other tomorrows.
Yeah. So
talk to me about the kind of work and the clients that you're working with, the kind of work that you're lucky enough to have.
The work is by and large what I would describe as service and experience design. So I think my You're hearing maybe some applause outside because somebody walked in the door.
They've seen that I went with the green jumper.
Exactly.
They just thought that was amazing. So just round of applause. So
no, when people walk in the studio, sometimes they get a round of applause spontaneously, and that's always like a kind of a great joke. Most of what we do is service and experience design. I think part of that comes from what I do best with that kind of architectural background, the spatial thinking. Like, it was remarkable to be in an architecture practice in my career where they started to think about architecture as a touch point for large organizations and brands, as opposed to just this precious formal thing that's like magic. And you don't want to put a sign on it at all, let alone a brand. But to think of buildings and the built environment as part of this larger ecosystem. Fast forward 20 years, I think it's no surprise to us that that's the way that large organizations are thinking about space. So service and experience design becomes a natural extension of that. We have 11 practitioners now doing this work, and the clients vary widely. And that's why I'm a consultant, because I have this sort of intellectual wanderlust, and I don't like doing the same thing twice. And I share that with all my colleagues. And so anything from large, massive tech companies or financial services companies to mom and pop local organizations, those are, that breadth is because we're an independent studio and you make those choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to training as an architect. And Did you practice as an architect?
I did. I loved it, and I'd still love it. My wife is an architect. Almost all my friends are architects, and many of them are tremendously talented. Yeah, almost like soberingly talented architects. And I see how kind of amazing that practice can be. But I also see some shortcomings in the practice, which is that we spend a lot of time. Architecture is very complicated, right? There are huge financial implications. There are organizational implications. There are so many different sort of technical and economic and sociological things that you need to think about as an architect. All of that burdens the process. That said, I think what we're taught to do in architecture is very much the same, I think, as what we do in human-centered design. Yeah. It's just that the professional practice of architecture doesn't provide the time. And frankly, architects don't get paid to do the kind of design research that we do. And I think that's changing. I think that's changed, frankly, a lot in the last 20 years since I kind of left architecture. And for the better. I think there are architecture firms that are really changing the mode of practice and bringing human-centered design type and design research capabilities into the process. But there's still a long way to go. And so I wasn't going to wait around for that. I found another path.
All right, fair enough. So as an architect, and I've had architects on the show many times before, one of them famously quoted himself as a reformed architect. Yeah, and I always thought that was quite an interesting framing.
I say recovering architect.
Recovering architect. Yeah. But that's kind of bashing architects in somewhat, because many of the architects I know, and even in Dublin, they're remarkable. They're very forward thinking. They bring a lot of the proactivity of lots of other practices into their practice. But I'd be keen to know a little bit more around the formal training that you received as an architect and how that really kind of stimulates the practice where you see today, because they obviously didn't teach you how to use Miro or Figma or any of these tools when you were studying to become an architect. And now you find yourself, I don't know, I'm going to have a guess here, 20, 25, 30, 35, I have no idea how many years ago, 50 years. You're like, stop, Gerry. What do they do in architecture to really set architects up to make sure that they've got the resilience and adaptability to design for the future?
I mean, the practice is not based on tools. So the beauty of, I think, architecture and many studio-based practices is that it's studio-based. And so what you learn is how to be adaptable and operate in a studio environment, collaborate with others. And it's that's actually the fundamentals of the education. And this is where I get nervous about where education is going, because it is becoming more oriented on professionalization, more tools based. I have lots of students, even graduate students, coming in saying, I just want to learn how to use XYZ tool better. And my response is usually like, that's completely the wrong way to approach this. So like, let's unwind that, and try to contextualize what you want to do in a broader conversation. So, I think studio culture is, whether it's architecture, sculpture, whatever it is, that's the fundamental. And if you know how to operate within a studio with other folks, then you can start to layer things on. Yeah.
I mean, I had a podcast yesterday with the authors of this book here, which is still on my desk, Martin Tomich and Steve Beatty from UX Australia. We're talking about designing tomorrow. And one of the pieces, it's a really good book. I'll give it another quote out on this podcast: "Strategic Design Tactics to Change Your Practice, Organization, and Planetary Impact." And one of the things that I'm really keen to hear is, like, you've worked in really large organizations, you've worked as an architect. Where are you seeing design currently? And obviously, with all of the stuff that's going on in the US at the moment, where do you see design sitting amongst all of this? And what's our role? Like, I mean, the noise that's coming out of the States at the moment, in particular, has somewhat distanced ourselves from the other real core problem in the world, and that's global warming, a lot of the homelessness crisis. It's an epidemic in this part of the world. Where does design sit in all of this for you, now that you've got like the architectural background, the designing of public spaces? I'm keen to hear, and you're working in education as well in Northeastern. What do you think our roles as change makers are currently, and where it's going to go?
I mean, that's a fantastic question. I think we're we are in the midst of, or maybe I hope we are emerging from a sort of market correction in the design world of sorts, where we saw all this sort of insourcing of design talent into large organizations and large companies. We're seeing a lot of layoffs, right? Companies are dispensing with those teams. They're saying, like, that's not important anymore. And those are like very clear financial decisions that are being made. Frankly, they are not long-term decisions. And so I think that's why I refer to it as a market correction, because I think the work is still there. We all know that these problems that you just described, whether they're something that we think of as tractable or not, they're present, and we need to be addressing those. So I think there's going to be a continued need for the way that we manage and we help others manage the changes that are happening in our lives. I mean, my definition of design, and this is what I teach, is that design is our uniquely human response to change. It's the one thing that we do when confronted by difference in the world, by new anything, right? Design comes to the fore, whether we're doing that in our homes and this sort of like everyone is a designer kind of mode, or we're doing it for others, right? All of those modes of practice I kind of believe in, and I think are on some sort of spectrum. As professionals, I think we have to really roll up our sleeves and get a little bit more engaged with the world around us. And I think that means getting more political. That means, and I think we're going to start to see people saying like, no, this is like, I'm not going to do that kind of work. I think we're going to, at least in the United States, we're going to be confronted by having to make very serious choices about whose side are you on. The politicization right now that's happening, the Trump administration with Elon Musk and everything, is just absolutely bonkers. And we're going to have to take sides, and I think it's going to be, a much more politically engaged set of conversations than we've had in the past. And I think that's great. And I think it's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. But that's what we need. And my students all know it. And if you're in my classes, you're aware of what's coming. You're aware of the fact that even as designers, we've been signaling some of this stuff for 50 years and not really addressing the root causes. And that has to change.
So without kind of playing too ignorant, what is coming in your eyes?
Well, here in the United States, I think we're basically, we have a tyrannical leader who is going to take away a lot of access to human rights, civil human rights. I mean, Trump is going to basically make life harder for many people who are not of the means to survive. And and so those support systems, which have already been eroding for decades, and we're aware of this, and we're trying to, build back better. Great idea, but there was so much to do, and that's all being upended right now. So no, I think we're going to have to find other ways to intervene.
It feels like, we are going back. Like we're taking decades step backwards, like, in terms of any of the progress we've made. And anyone out there who thinks otherwise, I'd love to hear from you and get your perspective on why you think that might not be the case. But all the work that we've been doing,
Gerry, do you mind? I should say before you kind of continue, I am speaking on my own behalf. These are my own.
Absolutely.
So you've mentioned other organizations that I'm affiliated with, and these are my own. These are my own thoughts and positions. So I just want to put that out there before we.
Absolutely. Lee's given his own perspective on things, the way we currently see the version of reality that we see in front of us. But I'd love to understand, there's so many cuts happening in America with designers in particular. And, design education has never, imagined that this would be a case where designs were just slashed across the board. We find ourselves at a huge crossroads as designers, I feel, especially in the US at the moment. And as you said, like, taking sides is one option, but, taking it a little bit more of a reframing thing. I'm trying to not take the side of either, right or wrong. I'm kind of trying to understand what's actually happening and where the perspectives are. And what I'm hearing is there's a lot of people afraid out there. There's just a lot of fear of, everything being taken away from you. Any of my American friends, most of them are kind of like anti-Trump, to be honest. But I think there's a deep-rooted fear there. And designers still need to put food on the table. Many of them have children and families to provide for. And it puts itself in an awkward position of saying, well, actually, we need to get money. What does that look like for a designer in America at the moment who finds themselves out of work, who spent a lot of money going through education and thought that they were in a steady job in the US government, and now they're in a situation where they're unemployed and healthcare is gone? And they I know this is going into a really political podcast, but trying to understand, what does the future look like for those designers? Should they think about leaving the States and move into other countries? That's what a lot of my American friends have messaged me saying, maybe I should move to Ireland. Can I sponsor? But so what's your advice? Well, you've been at design conferences and you're working with clients. What do you say to people? What can they do at this time to make themselves feel less at unease?
I understand the instinct to want to get out and remove oneself from this. And I think, for some people, that's going to be the right choice. I think there's a lot going on in the question that you're asking. So maybe we can try to unpack that. I think there was, to some degree, built up over time, some slightly unrealistic expectations about what design could do that were built up. I feel like Robert Fabricant, in a couple of essays that he wrote for Fast Company last year, started to really tease this out. And I think these were slightly unrealistic expectations. We weren't really being honest with ourselves, and when given the opportunity to really take charge and lead, we leaned back, right? Instead of leaning in, we leaned back, and we sort of said, "Hey, I don't know how to be a designer and be a corporate leader or a government leader. I'm just going to kind of go with the flow." And we leaned away from what we do best, which is navigate change. I think, and I think obviously a lot of these layoffs, both at the corporate level and the kind of government level, are tremendously unfortunate. But we are going to have to come back. We're going to have to rebuild. This thing that we're seeing happening right now is super detrimental.
Yeah.
But I find there's a bit of hope in watching an administration completely dismantle all of the things that we built in the last, let's say, 75 years to 100 years, right? In terms of the social sector and support systems here in this country, because I know we can build them back.
Yeah.
If you can dismantle something, we can, I don't know, is this a word, to mantle something? Remantle?
Yeah.
Rebuild.
Made it up there. It's tomorrow-ize a word.
That I like that. Okay. We'll go with tomorrow-ize. I think this is all going to be there for us. The question is, can we take care of one another in this interim, as designers, in this interim period? I think we've been too dependent on large tech companies. I think our kind of benefits models for what the designers' expectations for what they should be paid became as inflated as the tech sector in the last 15 years. I think that was maybe confusing us a little bit. You saw people jumping off and going to Meta and other companies and making 2 or 3 times their salary. It's hard to come back from that, right? But that is the sort of market correction I think we're dealing with. But I still think the needs of human beings are there fundamentally. The work is going to have to get done. We're just have to find different ways to do it. And I live in Boston, so put this in context, because we have a very progressive mayor who is going to put the effort in to filling the gap in where the federal government is going to kind of back away. So that does give me hope as well.
For the future, definitely. I mean, you're right about that. This administration is destroying all of that work and does give us an opportunity to rebuild. And this is where design can be at the center of that conversation. But it does give us that kind of like second level horizon of how do we get to that point without leaving, and designers leaving and becoming something else where they can, I don't know, put food on the table. And we could be at risk of losing, tens or hundreds of thousands of designers in the States to other professions at some point. It's a really tricky time.
Sorry, Gerry, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. What I love most about designers is our adaptability and our ability to flex and to find opportunities to make a difference wherever we are. And if designers leave the quote unquote, leave the discipline and go use those same design tools in other modes elsewhere, that's actually probably the best possible outcome, because it's really, we can always rebuild the queue of the design talent. But where we've really struggled is to have meaningful impact in ways that can affect society. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that you're working at Northeastern.
Yep.
What's the vibe like amongst the next generation of designers when they're watching all of the kind of changes happening in America at the moment? And what are you doing, I guess, as a leader in the university to try and include different kind of potentially modules of what does the future of education look like for your classes?
With my so I teach graduate students and undergrads. With the undergrads, many of whom I describe as design curious, like they're kind of like have one toe in design, or maybe like one leg. They're in some sort of joint program or something. They probably weren't given permission by their parents to go into design as young people. Right. So my job with those students is to kind of honor the design that's already in their lives, whether it's the pop music they like, the sneakers they wear, the water bottle or backpack, or whatever it is. Find that and try to center that design moment and make it something bigger than what they've given it space for in their lives, right? If we can kind of focus students there, and then so that they know that design is already happening to them and that to some degree they're almost already designers, right? Then what I really focus on is showing that the unintended consequences of the last century of design, of making a bunch of shit and putting it out into the world, both physical and digital, without a mindfulness about what comes next is the central thing that we need to fix. So, you know, if it's a water bottle or a pair of sneakers that is the most meaningful design moment in your life, or a pop song, let's recognize where that comes from.
But going into the graduate program where designers are, you know, I found with coaching a lot of young designers, they are really interested in trying to make positive impacts in the world. And when they're seeing, you know, a lot of the changes, a lot of the great agencies in America that I deeply respect, some of them, you know, laying off designers, and even the ones in the UK, when I was there last week, lots of great agencies closing their doors. It could be seen as like, you know, maybe they're going to struggle when they get out into the workforce. What can other academic institutions around the world do to foster that optimism and make sure that they're not going out into the world full of fear about the future of their role as designers, should I say?
Yeah. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is maybe the way to think about it is actually embrace the fear a little bit. To know that what you're doing is, you know, I think the people that go into design that think it's like just sort of, I'm using air quotes here, like, you know, gentleman's discipline, you know, from the past, like this, like, oh, you know, it's a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
It's not a lifestyle. It's fucking work. And you have to be prepared to like really put in an effort. There's going to be all kinds of ways that you do that, but it might not be sexy right out of the gate. So I think if we can actually kind of fortify young people to understand that this is something, you're doing something the world needs. It's not going to be easy. And to kind of prepare yourself for that. I think that's part of this. I think we've spent a lot of time educating students with this kind of, frankly, building unrealistic expectations about what's going to be on the other side. And we need to just stop doing that and get real about this shit, because
I know it's a scary time. Like, and if I had any of my children and they're about to start design school, I'd be like, okay, well, what's the world like when they're going to come out? In fact, you know, my two young children are applying to become designers. That's mainly because all I do is talk to them about design. They want to create, but I guess they just don't have the understanding of what it's like out there at the moment. And I can tell it's hard for a lot of people currently in the world of design, especially in parts of America that I'm deeply connected with. If you're okay with this, Lee, I'm going to come off this topic a little bit because I don't want it to become highly politically charged, because there's so many other areas I want to talk to you about. Like, you know, anyone who doesn't know Lee Moreau, he's got a couple of podcasts, okay? And Rachel had mentioned to me saying, hey, you know, you should try and reach out to Lee, and it'd be really good to connect. Let's start off. I'm keen to hear your perspective about why you podcast and why you create design podcasts specifically, because you're a design nerd like myself.
Yeah, I mean, for two reasons. So the first reason was, and actually, well, the reason I started podcasting is because I got connected to Design Observer, who had been podcasting for 13 or 14 years. So they were very early to the game in design podcasting. I think Design Observer, we had our 20th anniversary last year, I think. So half of that time they've been in podcasting. You know, what was once a blog became a sort of a media platform. But really at the center of it, it was a community. And I remember when I was still working as an architect in New York, reading Design Observer in the early days. I mean, the comments section in that blog, and it's hard to imagine a time when the comments section was so robust and articulate and inspiring and fascinating. And you'd have Jessica Helfand and Michael Beirut writing in the margins and writing in the comments and engaging actively all of these young professionals like me. It was amazing. So I think the sense of community is what kind of drew me initially to Design Observer. And that kind of took me to podcasting because during COVID, I think the community was very hard to find at times. And there was a way that sort of this mode of engaging one another was a way of kind of checking in with the community. And then that kind of led me to thinking that, gosh, this is kind of interesting, kind of fun. And as we were saying before, we kind of formally started here, I think of podcasting and human-centered design both as oral modes of practice. I think of the work that I was doing to build the Futures Archive, which is the first podcast, as creating an oral history of architecture, creating an oral history of design, and specifically human-centered design, because that's what, that's what we do. We go out into people's homes. We talk to them about what they care about, their families, their friends, their health, what they like to eat, and try to influence the world in some way for them. So that's talking to people.
Yeah. I'm always encouraging people who want to get into podcasts to start thinking about it, only if they're serious about it, because it's very easy to start a podcast. It's very hard to keep doing it, is what because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But what is it giving you? This is something that, because I don't get to speak to other podcasters very often. When I see them, like people who I might know who do podcasts in Ireland or even in the UK, we get to talk about this stuff. But I'd be keen to hear your perspective. Obviously, as an architect, you started doing this maybe 9 years ago, was it?
Yeah. Podcasting we started, I think in 2021. Maybe it was only 4 years ago. It's pretty recent.
About 4 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
So what have you taken from the practice of podcasting? How has it developed, Lee, is what I want to understand a bit more about.
Yeah. And, so all of the first show that we did, the Futures Archive, we always had a co-host. So it was me and a co-host. And so for me, it was being in dialogue and conversation with that other person and talking about a topic that they were excited about too, and whether it was a toothbrush or, the blender or something like that, and really kind of digging in. So it was a way of kind of nerding out with someone who you really respect and you're super smart. It's a formalization of a conversation. And, I think it's actually sometimes, we interact a lot. Let's say even in the university, and I love, I have many colleagues I love. It's a great community, but a lot of it tends to be rather superficial. Faculty meeting. Let's not glamorize this stuff. Like, it's mostly organizational, tactical things that we're talking about. But when you're doing one of these shows, like what the conversation we're having now, we can actually engage on some pretty deep stuff. We can roll off topic. We can spend time. And this is just a way to put a set of headphones on and spend time with one another. And that's a nice space to be in. It's a luxury. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. It really is. Like, I find, there's two things I find. Like the practice of listening is something that I've really taken to another level. Like the ability to tune into small parts of the conversation and then have the privilege of being able to say, actually, what do you think about that? And it stress tests my own biases a lot of the time. So I'm always keen to hear like how it has affected their lives when you podcast, because we mentioned there, like, I've never met Rachel Dekas in person. Okay.
Oh, really?
But never in person.
Oh, she's great. Okay.
I know. Is she great? Only joking. We know she's great. Everyone knows in this podcast. Hopefully they're laughing at that joke. But one of the things that I find is it's like a level above the superficial kind of Twitter or any of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You become real friends.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very fast. A lot of the people that I've met through the podcast, I believe I'll be friends with them for the rest of my life. Like, we create this thing together, and it's quite precious. And, we co-create it in the end, because I always give full control to the guest, so they're happy before it goes out. But it's something that we've shared. It's a moment that we've shared together. It brings people closer together, So looking at your own trajectory and what you're going to be doing for the next couple of years, in some ways it's great that you've created other tomorrows. You're working on that now at the moment. What excites you about the future of design, where you're currently at? at this point in your career? Because you're early 40s is what we were saying beforehand.
I appreciate that rounding. That's very helpful for me. Where do I see things going? So, in spite of the slightly depressing trajectory of the conversation at times, but I'm a realist about this stuff, and I think the political climate that we exist in is real, and we need to talk about it and confront it as if it's a real thing. But every designer is optimistic. If you're not optimistic and you're in design, you're doing something wrong. Really. So let's keep that in mind. I'm a very optimistic person. I'm excited about the future. What I'm excited about with Other Tomorrows is that I've worked with some great, amazing people like IDEO, so Rockwell Group in architecture and several other architects. In addition to that, IDEO is an incredible community of designers, obviously in the aughts, a great time to be there in the kind of golden age of design consulting. I saw some amazing things and met some amazing people. Then I was at 2x4 in New York with Michael and Susan and Georgie, three phenomenal design partners and leaders. And then I was at Continuum for 10 years, right? So you put all that together. I've experienced many great contexts in which design takes place. And building my own studio with my partners, what we're trying to do is create a kind of two different lenses. One is a lens where we can really use this oral mode of practice, human-centered design, to kind of imagine new futures. You mentioned Dunn and Raby and the work that they do in speculative design and really projecting new futures, which we're going to need desperately. And the Trump administration is going to force, I think in a good way, force our hand to really, really push ourselves to think about some truly new futures that we thought, hey, I'm not even going to go into that dark space, but we've got to enter it and come out on the other side. Yeah. And then on the other end, it's delivering those experiences to the world. And as an architect, making things is fundamental to what I do. This is not a trivial thing. So, going deeper into prototyping and delivering experiences, both physical and digital. But these rich service experiences that I like to do, which are, in hospitality, we do a lot of work in commercial aviation, where there's not just, products on shelves, but they're in digital platforms, but there are spaces and people and things that they say and I love food projects because there's also, you add perishable goods and supply chains for that in there too. I was just at a conference the last few days in Dallas, the Women's Food Service Forum, which is also a client of mine. Was Lucy Flores at that? I think they were. I don't think so. I'm not sure. So to be honest with you, I don't know Lucy, but there's a lot of women's conferences having right now because International Women's Day is maybe a week away. So I was at this conference and, the price of eggs in the United States is a big crisis right now. And so just adding that to the mix of trying to deliver a service experience when it's the price of eggs is out of control. So, I just bring that up as one of the complex things that makes, for me, design really exciting because it's not just words on paper and lines on paper. It's actually building experiences and bringing them to life. So that breadth between those two ends of the spectrum, that's for me tremendously exciting. And to build a team that can actually work across that is, I don't know, I'm finding it really fun.
No, there's a few things that I've taken away from this conversation already. Okay. And that's, I don't think he meant it, but we have to be ready for the fight almost. The next couple of years, we do need to hunker down and somewhat, but we also, the benefits that are coming out of this is we need to become masters of our crafts and we need to become experts at delivery. We need to be able to make sure that what we're going to be doing is going to provide impact and it's going to provide an ROI. So we need to do what we're talking about all the time. I hate that seat at the table, but being able to talk and be able to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it is critical.
I think if we think that we're not just delivering design, let's take that out of our head. Like, we're not delivering design. We're delivering modes of care for people. If we start to think about it, whether it's healthcare, whether it's hospitality, whether it's service design in government, whatever it is, we have to be taking care of one another as human beings, because there are assholes out there that don't give a shit, that are not going to be taking care of us. And so that's what we need to steel ourselves for.
So it's a good call to action for community, really. Like, and myself and Mark, who I do a lot of work with, we were at an event in London last, I don't know, what day is today? Tuesday, maybe last Wednesday. And I was having a call earlier on today with somebody who runs a community down in Australia. And I was telling them that there was lots of young designers at these communities who were sharing and they were networking and were talking about their impact and knowledge exchange. Design isn't going away. I just think it's going to probably have to adapt a little bit more over the next couple of years in particular, as we're seeing so much stuff happening around the world. But community, I think, is integral to the support that we can give one another. Like, you know, what's the communities like in Boston? The design communities. Do you get any chances to go to any of these events locally?
I go to some of these events. We host some of these events here in the studio. We're starting to do that now. So we opened a studio, like 4,000 square feet here in downtown Boston, so we can kind of be part of that network. And that's the other crazy thing we're doing is like, instead of going virtual, I'm saying, no, we're going to build a studio. Like, we have to like lean in. I think that's a really strong advice, Lee.
So what's on the horizon for the next couple of months with the work you're doing at Design Observer? Now's the time to give a plug.
Design Observer, we're going to be launching the kind of flagship podcast that I was interviewed for maybe 6 or 7 years ago. The Design of Business, the Business of Design. That's the big podcast on the platform. Right. I think the new seasons of that will launch in March, if I'm not mistaken. So if you're probably already subscribing to the Design of Business, the Business of Design. If you're listening to this podcast, no offense, but I think these two shows are two of the big ones on my list. So that's going to launch. We just wrapped up the Design As show last week. I think we launched our final bonus episode with Don Norman, which was a total trip. I mean, that was amazing.
Like? What was that like?
That guy. You know, he's in his, if I'm not mistaken, his early to mid 80s, incredibly sharp and engaged. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, like, you know, I think there's been a little bit of, he's received some criticism the last few years, and I think some flack. And I think he's actually been hearing it and trying to move forward, to his credit. And I think, you know, I want to give him a little bit of grace and believe that, given what he's done and what he's contributed to our lives and, you know, my life, I mean, I'm not sure we're not having this conversation, perhaps, if not for Don Norman, right? Yeah. So, let's not forget that. What's interesting is there still might be more to come from Don Norman, because he's still curious and still working.
Absolutely.
So we'll see.
He's still working. Definitely. I haven't got the new book, but like, it's they're promoting it at the moment. I can see I still get the newsletters. But yeah, you're right. Like, it's, some people have issues with Don, but for me, in my perspective, like, as I said, many of us in this field have a lot to be thankful for the work that Don has done, and the creating of that first book, The Design of Everyday Things, really was transformative, and it opened up the doors for lots and lots of design agencies around the world. So if we can just park that stuff for a little bit, like, and just give him his credit for what he's done, I think that's probably a fair way to talk about Don Norman. But look, Lee, I know you're a busy man. You've got up early. You were at a late night, not late partying. It was late night flying. And I thank you for coming on the show, okay? Because it's been a while for us trying to get this time in the calendars. I always end every podcast by thanking people for their vulnerability, letting me go left and right and up and down in conversations, and, you know, just being utterly curious and responding to the questions that I had about politics with grace as well. So I do appreciate you giving me the time and energy today. Thanks so much. And if you ever need anything, just please, you're more than welcome to come back on the show.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for making this space and your patience with making it happen. It took a little bit of time, as you said. But I also think, as in listening to your show, and you've done do this show, you do the other show with Mark. You're making a really great platform for a lot of us to kind of find ourselves and our grounding. And we're going to need more of these kind of rooms to be in as we move forward. So thank you for that.
Oh, thanks. That's very nicely. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.